So today I'll be breaking down Tomie's story and her death, her final death, because throughout this 20 plus chapters, she has many deaths, so this won't be her final death. But first we need to know the story of Tomie. The story starts with Tomie's funeral. She's been chopped up to pieces, but they don't know who did it. The teacher feels responsible, but one girl's claiming that she left with Tomie until the intersection in Satsura. Then she took off from there. The other girl's praying, saying to wake her up from this nightmare. The next day, the teacher thanks everyone for showing up to the funeral yesterday. The same girl who was praying gives us backstory of how Yamamoto was in love with Tomie. And it isn't fair that this happened. The teacher explains that the police has no leads yet, so it's dangerous for girls to go out and about alone at this time. Then he tries to make a lesson out of Tomie's death, that if it's for it to mean anything, we should take this as a lesson. The fact is, she's not coming back. Then guess what? You know, that crazy trope? In the middle of that, the door opens, and guess who it is? Tomie. Everyone is shocked. I'm shocked, alright? The rumor of Tomie coming back circled around the school. When she's walking about, she gets stopped by Mr. Tachi and asks her to follow him into the teacher's lounge. Him thinking that she might be Tomie's twin sister, but she claims that she doesn't even have a sister. Him still not believing, thinking that she's going to stir up some trouble. She jumps in for a hug and tells him, "I love you. When I graduate, you'll still marry me, won't you?" Tachi seems to be getting irritated by this. A group of students are still trying to wrap their head around if Tomie is who she says she is, and that if she's still alive. One student brings up the point that if it's really her, she has nothing to do with it because she's alive and fine. We should just be happy. But this gets interrupted by a teacher saying that he has some bad news. Transitions to Mr. Chikagi getting restrained by a couple men saying, "Get a hold of yourself." Then people stumbling to understand how she's even alive and explain that the dental records were a perfect match. And also one guy checked the Bureau of Identification. They already cremated the body and the remains. Students taught about how scary it is that Tomie drove Mr. Chikagi insane. Tomie tries to get Yamamoto's attention. Transitions to Tomie walking with their friend Reiko, saying that Yamamoto is being cold to her and admits that she shouldn't have slept with Mr. Chikagi. But even her friend Reiko is acting weird and she demands what's going on. She walks away from Tomie, thinking that maybe she never did die. Maybe none of this really happened. It's just a nightmare, but turns back. Tomie is looking over the bridge. Reiko runs away and manages to get back to the school where Yamamoto sneaks up behind her. She says make it stop to him, and she can't take it anymore. Yamamoto says he feels the same, that he's about to lose it like Mr. Chikagi. Also, he thinks that this is a part of her plan to drive them mad, and we can't play into her hands. Then she says there's only one way out. We need to turn ourselves in. I assume it goes back in time to the day that Tomie died. They're at a small mountain called In-Eri-Yamima, perfect for geology lessons. Mr. Chikagi tells the class it's time for recess. Tomie doesn't join the rest of the students, but instead hangs out with them on the side of a little ledge. The other students take notice. Tomie begins to tell him that we should get hitched and tell him to leave his wife. She can't stay quiet forever. The school's gonna know and that she's pregnant. Then suddenly Yamamoto grabs her by the arm and says, "What has he been teaching you?" The argument starts to get heated. The other students down under start to notice. Then he slaps her. She decides to walk away, but she trips and falls off the ledge or a cliff. All right. All the students down there start to circle around her body. They say that she's dead. Yamamoto begins to panic, saying we should call the ambulance, but Chikagi grabs him by the arm and says, "You caused her death, but you're not going to turn yourself in, are you?" Then the other student speaks up and says, "Yeah, he's right, Yamamoto. You don't need to do that. It isn't your fault. She was just clumsy. There's no reason for Yamamoto to ruin his life," saying that they'll protect him. Chikagi says, "You guys had a technical education today, did you? One of y'all must have a toolbox." They bring one over and begins to plan out, saying that the guys will get undressed while the girls keep lookout. All the most students are holding some type of object, while others are holding hand saws, and they just cut away. Then out of nowhere she coughs and they say she's alive. They ask Chikagi what they should do, but he doesn't answer, but instead stabs her right in the mouth. Once done cutting her to pieces, he tells the boys to bathe in the river. After that, he says there's 42 pieces and 42 of us. Everyone will get a piece and are discarded where no one will find it. Then they start to walk away like nothing happened. Reiko got a heart since she was considered Tomie's only friend. But you know, what a friend, huh? They didn't stop in or nothing. She decides to drop it over the bridge. Then in the current time, a couple of people are looking for Yamamoto and Reiko, saying that we need to reach them before they get to the police. Reiko's telling Yamamoto we should turn back, and he's like, "Shh." The other people hear him and they start chasing after them. Yamamoto and Reiko run from the other students. They get cornered. One guy walks up and saying, "The day's getting late, let's all go home. You can't get away with this," and lunges with the knife. Yamamoto kicks him in the stomach. This is the opportunity to run. Reiko trips because she's not being able to run on her own. They surround him again, but Tomie shows up. The group of students are shocked and they run, leaving only Reiko and Yamamoto. Reiko tells Tomie she's sorry, but Tomie says, "You and Yamamoto are seem really close." Reiko says no, not at all, then runs. She begins to narrate, saying that later they found Yamamoto where she left him, his mind gone mad. The setting changes to a beach. 3 days later, she moved to a town by the ocean, and she begins to hear news of old classmates saying some left the school, some committed the S word off themselves, but she doesn't know whatever came of Tomie, and say now she can think in a clear frame that maybe she was alive after all, and the whole trip was just some nightmare, saying how can they have done such a thing. She knows Tomie wasn't a ghost. She walks further and further down the beach and notices a wrapper and think it looks familiar. You know, the wrapper from the heart that was wrapped up and she threw over the bridge. Hint. But where's the contents? She sees a cave and looks inside. Says that it seems that Tomie has found her again. This type of storytelling shown in chapter 1 continues all through the 28 chapters of this book. Tomie meets a man and this man falls in love with her and drives them emotions of like they just love her so much that they want to kill her, or other emotions that drive them to that too, but mostly they love her. So chapters 18, 19, and 20, we finally reach the climax. You know, they're building it up of her death finally. So chapter 18 starts with Tomie walking into this guy's house, Yukio. Instead of him calling her Tomie, he calls her Ayaka. Alright, this will make sense later on, right? He tells her, "Hey, I'm too busy studying, I don't have time for this." Then the mom walks into a room and tells her the same thing, that he doesn't have time for this. He's studying for his entrance exams. But Ayaka gives her a frightening stare and says, "Keep out of this." Then Ayaka's mother comes to pick her up and apologizes, saying that this won't happen again. Then later, Yasuko, that's her sister's name, goes and confronts Ayaka, saying, "You need to stop going to Yukio's house." Ayaka begins to tease her, saying, "I know you had a crush on him, but it's too late now, I claimed him. And if only if you were born with my natural charm." Later, Yasuko is crying to her mother, saying, "Why is she so pretty? Are you sure she's my sister?" The mom reassures her, saying that she is, but the dad doesn't think so. He thinks it's funny that she doesn't even look like him, and that he's been seeing a guy wandering around the house. The mom tries to defend her answer by saying that when Ayako was born, people said that she looked like him, but he shrugs off the answer. But the mom says, "Well, she did look like you until she changed after the first year, but now she doesn't look like anyone in the family." Ayaka is walking, but someone's watching from the bushes, but when she looks into the direction of the guy, he runs. Yasuko is walking with her friend Yakin, but she brings up Yasuko's sister, but Yasuko doesn't want to talk about her. But Yakin heard something interesting and wants to show her and take her to this big mansion, but sees a girl outside. Yasuko thinks it's her sister, Ayaka, but something's different, and her friend tells her she does look like her, huh? But there's like 2 or 3 other girls in the town that look the same, and they're all 7 to 8 years old. Ayaka sneaks up behind them while they're watching and says, "Let me guess, you're bad-mouthing me." Her and the other look-alike lock eyes. Yasuko tells her mother all this, and the mom asks what was the name on the nameplate outside the mansion, Kaneshiro. This makes the mother remember an incident that happened when Ayaka was still a baby. They took her to the park, and a strange man with a trench coat and a hat walks up to him and says, "Cute baby," then stabs Ayaka with the needle and injects her with some red fluid, blood. She takes her to the hospital and they said she was fine, but nothing more, some prank. Crazy prank, right? And other kids were a victim too, and one of them being the daughter of Kenshiro. After that, the mom started to realize that Ayaka began to change. Yasuko says, "Are you saying that the shot changed Ayaka? And the other victims have the same face?" Her dad still doesn't believe it. Then transitions to Ayaka at Yukio's, telling him that the girl's irritating her and that she gets to live in a big house while she's stuck with this poor, miserable family, and says, "Yukio, can't you do something about it?" Then it cuts to Yukio acting suspicious while following the look-alike, the girl from Kenshiro. She notices him and starts to run. Kenshiro's girl sees some men and asks for help, that there's a slasher after her. They start chasing him. A whole crowd starts circling Yukio, and nothing else to do, he stabs himself. Yasuko is in the crowd and hears someone say, "Damn, he screwed up," and it was Ayaka. After this event, Ayaka is walking, then spots another girl that looks like her watching from behind a tree. But it's not the Kaneshiro girl, But in the middle of the stare down, the Kaneshiro girl, Tomie, shows up and confronts Ayaka, saying, "You try to kill me today and try to make it look like a random slasher?" She says, "Mark my words, you'll pay for this." Ayaka said to both of them, "You better watch out. I got more demons where that came from." As their eyes turn demonic and a mysterious man is watching from a distance. Then it cuts to a random man looking through the streets, looking for one of the Tomie clones. He gives up on the chase and stabs a random person. The sirens in the towns are making announcements saying that there are frequent outbreaks of random youth violence, that all citizens should stay home. Yasuko is sitting in the park wondering, why are all these boys obeying her sister? Is it because she's pretty? They'll die for her? A mysterious man walks up and says that he was the one that injected her with the blood, and that he was curious to see what would happen if he injected Tomie's blood at the start of life, and that they would change gradually into her. But everything's going according to his plan. But the problem is that they're trying to kill each other. He doesn't want that to happen. So he asks Yasuko to protect her sister, Ayaka. He says that he knows that he should be the one to do it, but he doesn't want to take the chance of them growing up to maturity and him wanting to rip them apart. The reason that these girls are different is that they can grow old, and he wants to see the arrogant and beautiful and grieves over her horrendous vulnerability. Yasuko agrees to help. The next panel is the three Tomies commanding their boys to kill the imposters. I bet you're wondering, who's that guy in the trench coat with the hat and he's injecting random babies to make him look like Tomie? So he used to be a model, right? And then one day he got tired of dating this one girl. He said, "I need someone else. I need someone like a model like me." Cause you could really tell his ego at this point. And he's telling this to some guy he's walking with. And he's like, "Well, I do know a girl, but she doesn't like taking pictures. She's good enough to be a model." So the guy's like, "Well, I could convince her. Don't worry. Set me up on a date." So once Tomie gets there, he's bombarding her with comments saying that she should be a model, but she's like, "Oh, I'm not interested. This is why you called me over here." But he's like, "No, don't go." He said he was cultivated by her beauty, and at that moment he wanted to make her his. After that, they went on many dates, and he confessed his love to Tomie. Tomie bursts out laughing, and he's like, "What's so funny? So you don't know how you feel about me then?" She just responds, "I don't know what to say. Not much, really." He never heard that from a woman before. Tomie said, "Oh, you must be popular, right? Supermodel? I didn't know your type was in fashion. He has such an ordinary face." But later on, he's just mad at what she said. Ordinary? The hell? He decides to call her back and set up another date. At that point, he put out every stop, no matter what the cost. But in the end, it didn't matter. She just shrugged it off like an old blouse. And it started to irritate him. Rio finally has enough and says, "Won't you understand how I feel about you?" Tomie says, "Well, I have a choice, you know." And he starts copying the comments from earlier and how he has an ordinary face and his figure, and says, "The problem is with your eyes." Tomie says, "At least you have a sense of humor, but compared to my beauty, you're not even on the scale. Come on, do you really think you're my equal?" Then he continues on saying that he's been with supermodels way prettier than her, and she doesn't even rank with them, and says, "You know that yourself. That's why you're too scared to be a model, not photogenic cell in your body." Tomie gets angry and says, "Be careful what you say to me," and walks away. Later that night, Rio gets confronted by a man asking if he's the fashion model. He says yeah. He slashes his face. The mysterious man runs away. Transitions to Rio at the hospital begging the doctor, "Please get rid of the traces of a scar." Well, the doctor said it's difficult because it's a double blade. And he's like, no, you have to understand. I'm a model. This is my life. Who's gonna hire a guy with a scar? Rio the next day asks Tomie to see him. She shows up and she makes a joke saying that, "Is that a face of an elite model? I guess it's divine punishment for acting like a smug." He's like, "What'd you say?" She said, "I guess your career's over now, huh? I guess people will still pay you to do other stuff on the street." This angers Rio, and he slashes her face with a knife and puts her in the car and drives away. They're in his apartment, and he tells her that, "Your face is beautiful as mine now," and says that will scar for sure. Now they're two of a kind. Tomie says, "What are you gonna do with me now?" He responds saying, "Might as well just stick together." He doesn't care about the money anymore as long as he has her. This is that toxic relationship type of stuff, you know? But the next day he notices that Tomie doesn't have a scar anymore, and she's like, "Well, I heal really fast." Then she tells him, "Just because you're ugly and you want everyone else to look like you? An egomaniac fool." He throws her on the bed and ties her up. Rio says it's just that he needs to be more creative and gets on top of her with the knife and starts cutting in. It turns out she didn't heal from these, but instead an infection set in and she started to deform. At one of the stages, her head seemed like it disappeared, or it's engulfed with many different different eyes and noses forming. The next day, chattering and mumbling started to come from Tomie, saying ugly man far below average. Then many of the Tomies began to take form. Bodies of her began coming out of the head wound and continued to say harsh words as before. Rio had enough and he dosed the room with kerosene and lit the mat. The next thing he knew, he was in the woods, looking at himself in the mirror, horrified. Then a voice says, "Gosh, what a horrible burn, huh?" Looking at him from under a tree was Tomie, but a different one that he hasn't met before. Since all that went down, he came across several more Tomies and they're all laughed in his face while flying their beauty. So now he's hoping that age will do the work for him. Then tells the woman, Yasuko, from the last chapter, tells her that her sister has been changing and as she grows older she'll become more like Tomie. And he begs her to make sure she lives to an old age. Then Yasuko says, "Who on earth is Tomie?" After that origin story for the trenchcoat man, Yasuko saying that the three Tomies, Mio Kenshiro and Mayo Hayama and her sister Ayaka Nakamura have assassins hard at work to wipe each other out. But the man in the black coat is taking care of them one by one, but they just continue to come. It cuts to Yasuko's house, where she spots a man outside. She tells her mother. The mother says, "Go hide your sister and I'll call the police." The assassin barges through the window. Yasuko is trying to get Ayaka to the attic, while the mom is still downstairs calling the police. While hiding, they hear a loud scream. They didn't come down until they heard the sirens. They found their mother dead on the floor, while the drunk father is fast asleep. But not long after that, someone torched their house, and they still managed to survive. Yasuko tells the man with the trench coat, saying she can't protect Ayaka by herself. And the man in the coat says, "Well, it's safer for you to move away, and he can take care of all the financial stuff." This Tomie asks Yasuko, "Who's that man?" Then once seeing his face, she's like, "Wow, he's so ugly," and bursts out laughing. This gets interrupted by a yell saying, "I did it, I finally did it. One of the assassins finally killed a Tomie." This one being Mayo Hayama, but Ayaka says, "So what? He's still got Mio Kaneshiro to deal with." The man in the coat takes his Tomie and burns her at the highest temperature to prevent her from regenerating. But after that, they move into an apartment in another town. The man in black continued to support them. But even after moving, Mio Kaneshiro is still after them. Time flew. One day, Ayaka was getting ready, saying that there's no better pleasure than living as a beauty. But in comparison, Yasuko, you're 22, but darn if you don't look 40. Yasuko responds by saying, "You're acting smug. Don't you know how hard I work to protect you?" The drunk father barges into the room saying, "You look great in that outfit. Creepy." So later on that night, he sneaks into Ayaka's room saying, "I've been holding back long enough." You kind of idea what he was gonna do, but Yasuko was there to save the day and stabbed him, saying, "I had to do it." Ayaka says, "Just leave it for the man in the black to clean it up." Later, Ayaka tries to leave, but her sister stops her. Ayaka says, "Zip it. I can't be a shut-in loser like you." As she opens the door, a hand grabs it. A man with the knife cuts Ayaka. Yasuko hits him with the bat and he went running. Yasuko checks on Ayaka. When she looks up, she's cut all over her face. She gets up and says, "This is unpardonable. Mio Kenshiro will pay for this," and walks off, waiting for Ayaka to return, but she didn't, thinking could it really be over now? But in the middle of her sleep, someone says, "Catching up on your beauty sleep?" It's Ayaka telling her to get up and that they're moving. She takes her to Kenshiro mansion. Yasuko's like, "What's going on, Ayaka?" She took over the mansion. She said it was pretty easy. She just pretended to be Miho, the other Tomie, and waltzed right in. Family was so confused they ended up self-destructing on themselves. And also the crazy part was that the man in black tried to save Miho, but it was wasted effort. Yasuko's thinking maybe he did that just to keep most of the Tomies alive as possible. But once moving in, Ayaka tells Yasuko that she's going to be a maidservant from now on. One day she sees Ayaka with the man. Yasuko tells the man in black this, and he's like, "What? You shouldn't allow any man near Tomie." Yasuko responds saying, "I can't protect Ayaka anymore. I'm just a household servant." And he said, "What happened to your resolve? We work solely to get the last laugh where it hurts her most." The next scene, Yasuko is trying to stop Ayaka from leaving the house, saying, "You can't risk your life any further," but she commands her to step aside. The man in black walks into the house and grabs Ayaka and ties her up, saying, "At least you'll grow old." This is what it's really about. Ayaka yelling, "I won't allow it. You'll pay for this. What you're doing to me, you'll regret it." Yasuko responds by saying, "No. This way you'll suffer and you'll go on suffering as you get older." Then slowly slowly a head starts popping out of Ayaka's. The man in black wrapped belt around the head that's bulging out, saying we better skip to the last resort. He pours cement around Ayaka to keep her safe and says don't worry, she won't die in there. Want proof? It's been days. You can still hear her moaning. Months has passed and over time Tomie's voice became somber and hoarse. The man in black says, don't you think it's time to check on her? Yasuko says sure, but the man in black, or Gramps at this point, is now over 100. He doesn't have the strength to break it, so he asks Yasuko to do it. She does a couple good swings on the cement block, but she says it's too hard. This is all she can do. Gramps says, to think that we spent years waiting for this moment and we must open it. Tomie ruined my life. She'll pay for it. And he picks up the pickaxe and starts chipping at it. Then it finally opens, revealing an old lady, barely recognizable from her youth. Gramps is laughing, saying, look at Tomie, but Granny couldn't see anything. The spot where Tomie should have been is empty. When she gets a closer look, she notices a crack that looked like it's been there for a long time. She wondered if that's how she got away. The foster continued down through the floor, and through it blew a breeze carried up from the unknown depths, which spun into the most plaintive moan in the world.